The agenda is posted on Legistar. I guess first we have to do a call to order. My apologies, it's been a little while on this one. Heather, could you call the roll, please?
Sure. Stephen Borgsdorf, not here. Jennifer Cornell, Alan Haber, and please remember to say whether you're here and where you're calling in from, jurisdiction-wise. So, Alan, we're doing roll call right now, and I just called your name.
Yeah, I'm right here. I'm on 531 3rd Street in Ann Arbor.
All right. Thank you. Sarah Hammerschmidt.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Jeffrey Henney.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Camilla Luzundia.
Here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for spring break.
Exciting. Rita Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Alice Ralph.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Great. Frank Wilhelm.
I'm here in Calhoun, Georgia, heading to Florida.
Adam Zemke.
Here in Ann Arbor.
And Councilmember Briggs.
Here in Ann Arbor.
And Councilmember Dish, who is absent.
You have his email anywhere?
I don't.
All right. With that, then we'll go to the first item on the agenda, which is just the approval of the agenda. There is, was everybody able, except for maybe Alice on Legistar, to access the agenda? Take a look at it. It's the fairly standard one that we normally have, Alice, just as a heads up, public comment and member news and updates, working group updates, the 4 working groups, and then timeline for recommendations report and the RFI discussion. So that is about it. Could we have an approval or request to approve the agenda?
I propose.
Use a link.
And a second?
Matthew is on. He has
Okay.
his hand raised.
And all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, perfect.
What?
Agenda passes.
What?
We'll go into the approval of the minutes from the January 6th meeting. Any questions on the minutes at all?
Hello.
Since I don't have them, I can't question.
Hello.
Well, I would just make a comment in our discussion of what should be in the request for information, because that was the discussion. I wanted to see among the things to be considered was in defining civic center building, indoor space, as well as outdoor space. That was not reflected in the minutes. I think it was reflected possibly in the actual request for information. In one of the responders, it was not responded to significantly by either of the responders, though. So I don't know what to say, but if it's comments on the minutes, I make that comment.
Okay.
That's a continuing question. That the Commons is a central park and a civic center that implies, I believe, a 4-season indoor-outdoor capacity.
Implies is not the same as specifies.
Ellen, do we need to adjust the minutes, or are we okay because it was in the
I
RFI?
just persist in this comment.
Okay. Could we have an approval to approve the minutes? All right, and we got a couple seconds there. So all in favor, say aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Then we'll go into public comment. Do we have any members of the public?
We do. Matthew has his hand up, so please go ahead. You should be able to talk.
For me?
Yep.
Great. This is my first time joining the meeting. I'm Matthew Altruda. I'm the curator of Sonic Lunch, and I do a lot of events And I just want to let everyone know how excited I am for the center of the city and that Sonic Lunch is a part of it. And I'm really excited for my programming at Liberty Plaza and how it's included in the vision of center of the city, and look forward to utilizing the whole park with years to come. It's very exciting for me. And I love Liberty Plaza and I love programming it, and the excitement of the park growing to a community center is something that I look forward to working.
Thanks,
That's my 3 minutes.
Thanks, Matthew.
Or part thereof.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. And we have Robert Black.
Can you hear me, Heather?
I can.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to speak before you again tonight. Since the inception of the Council of the Commons a year ago now, I have attended every meeting, shared my views at each public comment, and listened intently for where you have found common ground in your work. I applaud your willingness to actively listen to one another and remain open to the ideas of others. This is a model example of how a commons, in this case the center of the city, should form and grow. I heard alignment during your July 7th retreat last year. You formed working subcommittees around key focus areas to accelerate your progress. Comparable communities, agenda item 5A tonight, has yielded much learning from the experiences of nearby communities, like Detroit's 3 major parks and the city of Plymouth's ability to engage a broad coalition to create Kellogg Park that has become more than a park, a true civic heart to their community. The work you all did with short, medium, and long-range goals was most helpful. A good example of this is Chair Zemke's ideas presented June 2nd last year. Quote, "In my view," Mr. Zemke stated, "short-term usage relies upon very little alteration of the space, e.g. pop-up style uses. Primarily uses the spaces for events that do not require significant planning and sets a time period of space use for the next 6 months." Unquote. Following this lead, the initiating committee took action to create a series of activating events over the next 5 months that generated community interest and engagement. Mr. Zemke's intermediate term use proposed to, quote, "incorporate a mix of pop-up and more standing use activities based around longer running events, such that community members have an opportunity to become accustomed to events in the space and to offer feedback to help innovate," unquote. The Green Team's garden events from last year are being planned and extended this year to do just this. Other initiatives to grow public involvement include linkages, as you just heard, with Sonic Lunch, that has inspired people for 13 years in Liberty Plaza Park. Sonic Lunches in 2022 will help build public awareness of the center of the city's developing brand identity. Mr. Zemke's long-term use and planning objectives inspired me and contributed to our team's response to the city's request for information that you'll be discussing in agenda item 7. He said last June, quote, "ultimately creating a vision for the long-term use of this space is what likely brings everyone to this council." I agree with his assertion here. He goes on, quote, "I believe that combining elements from the city's past with an eye towards creating a new central gathering space that attracts and celebrates a diverse swath of Ann Arbor residents and visitors is what a central space needs to satisfy. Well, what this space will look like and be called is something that I hope we can all gain consensus around," unquote. I wholeheartedly support and encourage this last statement. Our RFI response is geared entirely toward this noble goal. I believe that we have the ability to do this, and I have offered many ways this past year in which this can be achieved. I look forward to your discussions to this vitally important vision to shape a most caring and enduring Ann Arbor that we will all be proud to create together. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. And then we have 2 callers. I don't see your hands raised, callers. Press star 9 if you would like to talk. Odile has her hand up, or did for a moment.
I wasn't sure you were.
All right, we have somebody on the phone who'd like to talk. All right, you should be able to go ahead. That's the person with the phone number that ends in 326. You should be able to speak.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
Great. All right. Thank you. My name is Jeff Crockett. I live at 506 East Kingsley, right downtown, and I'm been actively involved in the Commons and in creating a community garden. I am the person who's leading the Green Team. I'm calling for a couple of reasons tonight. One is to express my strong support for the proposal that was submitted in response to an RPI by Robert Black for a number of different reasons. The first one, which is the most obvious one, is his bid is 30% of MKSK. We're talking about from 36,750 to 56,500 for Robert's proposal, as opposed to MSKS, which is MKSK, which is 120 to 140,000. But number two is we're talking about someone who is local and who really understands Ann Arbor. He understands Ann Arbor so much that he adopted the theme past, present, future, which, by the way, was the theme of the sesquicentennial in Ann Arbor in 1974. His report is 16 pages. When you look at MKSK, they have a much longer overall presentation, but most of it is 54 pages is just basically pictures of what they've already done, and it's only 8 pages about what applies to the Ann Arbor project. I would also like to draw attention, you may or may not have gotten an email that I sent not long ago to Heather that I was hoping she could forward to you, and it includes a link to a website that I would like to talk about. Robert Black has submitted a response to the Council of Commons RFI where he shows an example of a rooftop garden in Oakland, California. And there's been a lot of conversation about how cement surfaces are not, in particular the library parking lot, are not suitable for a garden. Well, I would like to add to this conversation an article I found not long ago about creating gardens over cement surfaces, which provides an imperative for doing so. The article is titled Planting Living Roofs for Native Pollinators. And the first part is about sedums. Other parts will include about native grasses. I would urge you to look at the title of the journal, which is called Living Architect Monitor, a Green Roofs for Healthy Cities publication. This is totally consistent with our goal for this year in the Green Team to identify the community gardens as monarch way stations. And think of this, the city is spending thousands of dollars to create healthy streets. Creating a garden on portions of the library lot turns concrete into a much healthier place for the monarch butterflies and bees. And let's face it, surface parking in the library no longer makes sense. We are encouraging people to walk and ride bikes, not drive their cars downtown. Maintaining surface parking in this site totally undercuts A20. So I'm hoping you'll look at this article. In fact, if you do a bit of research, you're finding that all over the country, people are converting cement spaces into gardens, both on over surface parking lots and in large development complexes. I also want to point out that I'm very excited about the development of the Green Team this year because we're talking about expanding the sites. But this year, thanks to Rita Mitchell, applying for a monarch butterfly way station. Now, what's really important about this is we're going to be turning the gardens into an educational site. And Chris and I are starting with our own property. We're going to be dedicating a portion of our gardens basically to pollinator plants to attract monarch butterflies. This can really take off. And by having a demonstration site on the Commons this opens up to us to educate the public, which is education and engagement is really what the Commons is all about. So I thank you for listening, and I'm hoping that you'll approve Robert Black's RFI proposal. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. And then Odile has her hand up.
They say Odile is trying to get on and they have her blocked.
She's on. She should be able to talk.
Try.
You just need to unmute yourself, Odile.
Doesn't she have to do *9?
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, I don't need my phone. Okay, good. Because he was asking me for a meeting ID, and when I did the one I was given, it said that it didn't exist. Okay, I just wanted to say hello, welcome. It's nice to see everyone again. The spring is hopefully coming soon because it's still very much freezing. And I imagine that a lot of people will want to get out and enjoy the commons and enjoy places. So it's very important, I think, to be prepared and to allow people, even maybe we still mask if that's what they demand, but to be able to be on the common and in our town, enjoying themselves and to come back to lives once again. So we are preparing to do a gardening. I am the coordinator this year, and I am recruiting people that want to come and do some gardening. We will start the seedling next month. So I just wanted to let you know. I hope you are well and keep well. Thank you.
Thank you, Odile.
All right, we have one more caller with their hand up. Okay, so go ahead, caller with a phone number that ends in 822.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you, Heather, and thanks everyone on the council for the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is David Olson. I live in the neighborhood now known as Water Hill, and I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, and then left for many years, and now I'm back. So that's just a little. I've been back for about 10 years, so now that's just a little background. It's really exciting to hear about how this is all moving forward. Great to hear that Altruda is on the scene and excited about expanding into the new public space. The butterfly way station sounds great. The gardening, of course, so all very exciting. What I wanted to bring up tonight has to do with funding. I know that the Council of the Commons is going to be making recommendations to the city soon, and funding is always an issue. And I have something to sort of bring to your attention. As you all know, in 2003, the citizen voter taxpayers of Ann Arbor passed the Greenbelt Millage resolution that had to do with the acquisition and management and protection of land and park and open space. And early on in the development of this, or in the organizing for the library lot commons space, I talked to several council members as well as others at City Hall about the appropriateness of using some of those funds generated by the Greenbelt Millage for the common space. And I have always been directed to, or told that there's a resolution in place that restricts, that has to do with the guidelines for use of the Greenbelt funds, which stipulates that 2/3 go for land outside of the city, for acquisition and management, and that 1/3 of the funds can be used for inside the city, but that was for acquisition only. As I've been digging around more, though, I find that that is actually not the language on the millage. That is not what the people of Ann Arbor voted for. The language on the millage doesn't make any differentiation or talk of allocation, and says that all the funds can be used for, now I'm reading from the millage language itself, can be used for the acquisition and management of land and land rights both within and outside the city of Ann Arbor. That resolution that it serves as the guidelines for how the money can be used was a resolution that was passed by council, and of course can be nullified by another resolution. That resolution was passed 20 years ago, and I think our priorities have changed, the situation has changed, and it's time to revisit that. And so I would propose that the Council of the Commons recommend that the city nullify those procedural guidelines, again, 20 years later, and that we would start to use those funds now for the management of land in the city. And I just wanted to finish with a real quick quote. John Ruskin, who's a well-known thinker, writer, and social critic, once wrote, "The measure of any great civilization is its cities, and a measure of a city's greatness is to be found in the quality of its public spaces, its parks and squares." And when I look around, as I travel around the country and around the world, and even just around Michigan, it's one of the things you see in every town, in every city, is some sort of a public space, a town square, a commons. And I just can't believe that in Ann Arbor we can't pry loose enough funding to make a public space that we can all be really proud of. And I think, in fact, that the people have voted not only to set this land aside for the commons and as public space, but we've actually voted to through 2034 to pay out of our taxes this millage. And I hope that we can redirect some of those funds ASAP to this center of the city project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, Heather?
Sorry, I'm muted. That is it.
Okay, perfect. All right, with that, we'll close public comment and move into member news and updates. Anything that folks would like to share before we go into working groups? Alan?
Alan? Oh, yes. Excuse me. I'd like to let you all know that Earth Day is coming up, and we have plans on the Commons for Thursday, April 21, Friday, Earth Day 22, and on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And much excitement, and anybody who wants to help out in that, please be in touch. The permit is in. Matt is cooperating in that. It's not going to be a big concert like Sonic Lunch, but it will be music and talk and opportunity for people to be at home in the center of the city. And I wanted to follow what I'm sure I raised at previous meetings, that always when we do events, there is a land acknowledgement that this land, not only of the center of the city, but the entirety of our area, is historically the land of the Potawatomi Nation of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Council. And they were basically put out of here around the time our bicentennial takes its beginning, and more from the 1820s, 1830s. And I've been participant in the powwow discussions and other with Native Americans who participated in our programs, and it seems appropriate that we begin to think of the question of land return as well as land acknowledgement, and how do we make from the city of Ann Arbor an invitation to the Potawatomi Nation for a community of the Potawatomi to resettle in Ann Arbor and to share with us their culture, particularly beneficial in terms of their historic relation to commoning and their capacity of resilience and adaptation to climate and such changes. I've been pursuing that, and there are several people. There's a person on the faculty, Kyle White, who is a Potawatomi, and does beautiful teaching on the values and of the Potawatomi culture and the sense of earth restoration, most important in the difficult times we approach. So I wanted to let you know, and anyone interested in that element of the development. And I further raised the sense in terms of the center of the city that the program of Juneteenth, the 19th of June, the Black community usually celebrates by keeping at the edge from Fuller Park, a march along the river to Wheeler Park. And the proposal is out that they should seek to center a program of celebration of their presence in Ann Arbor on the Commons before they take their march to Wheeler Park for always an incredible good potluck and so on. So those are some things I've been pursuing along the way with others. And so for your information, anyone interested in this and the Earth Day program is coming along. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Alice, you had your hand up too.
Yes. Just some short reactions to the comments that were made. I'll go backwards. I think it was David Olson had two nice points of view. One very high level about partly about the nature of a healthy city and its lovely spaces. I think the quote was from someone from another century, but it still stands well. Think it's good to realize what we're about here in that respect, that this is an integral part of our city. The other part, if I can recall, I think I'll just skip to another comment about the RFIs that we've received, the two that we received. And I think we should be cautious about how we talk about those. They're not really proposals, as I understand it. And yet, I think that's an impression that many people might have, that we're deciding on something that requires a budget request and all that stuff. We're not quite there yet, I think. But if I'm incorrect about that, I still would like for us to be clear about what we'll be talking about tonight and what we're looking at as we engage with those RFIs. Their responses rather than proposals.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alice. I think it is important that there is a clarity and certainly not a rush to take action tonight based on the next steps. But good discussion.
Oh, I also now I see my key word is the ordinance. It was good for us also to review the Greenbelt legislation and the ordinance that resulted, because there is a long-held belief among people who started out looking at the Greenway, even which is now called the tree line, that there was some money that was intended to somehow enhance our green spaces and natural areas within the city, parks, it's included. And so we've never seen that realized. And I don't believe that, personally, I don't believe that was excluded per se, but it sure has been it sure has been used as something that's only outside of the city. We have never seen the money that was sort of implied or maybe even promised for the city itself. So it's worth looking back at it again, I believe, too. So I support the idea.
Excellent. Any other members before we go into the working group updates? Okay. Well, with that, why don't we move into the next agenda item, which is the updates on any of the working groups. We don't have to go in the order that are listed. I don't know, Rita, I know you had worked on some things for the comparable communities. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure. First off, I want to say I'm sorry to my fellow working group members that I got our notes out to you rather late so that there was an opportunity for you to comment and maybe enhance them. But I will report briefly that we had a Zoom discussion with Paul Sincock, who is the city manager of Plymouth, who manages the Kellogg Park there. And he is very enthusiastic about their space. It has grown in use and improved over time significantly. And I'll just say that one of the things they do is assess the public reaction to the park. And the most recent survey that was done by Eastern Michigan University of residents of Plymouth was at 61%, said it's a very important thing for them to host entertainment in the downtown. And they do a lot of it. From, we've probably all heard about the ice sculptures, but there's also all kinds of music and celebrations. And they are constantly, I think, thinking about what's going on in that space in their town. It is very much engaged, the members of the community representing various groups are very much engaged with the parks. They have involvement from their DDA, from their local Lions Club, a local foundation that donated money for a fountain that I have not seen. It's been recently installed. They even have bathrooms that are funded, in their case, privately and monitored so that they are safe. So it is a really good model, I think, for us to see something that's so close to home and that I think engenders a sense of pride by members of the community. So I did not submit these minutes to the group because I really felt like it was good to have the work group comment first. So I can do that once we all agree. But that's where I am. Thanks.
Frank, did you want to add something?
Not a lot. Thank you, Rita. That was a good summary. The community really, in all aspects, seems to rally around the concept of this park as a kind of a centerpiece of community activity, which on occasion spills out into the downtown generally. They claim, and I don't doubt, that they have the second largest art fair in Michigan, which started out 40 years ago with 20 artists, and in recent years up to 400 artists. They have weekly music events that draw 3,000 to 5,000 people. I'm sure that I think the park itself is only a couple acres. I was surprised how small the acreage was because it seems to have such a presence in the downtown that it seems bigger, but it's not. And the city is very much engaged in making this a success. The management of the space and events is out of the city manager's office, and there's a whole structure to it in terms of determining what the fees will be for the organizations that want to sponsor events, and it all seems to work. And there was a number of questions. I think what we've reported, what Rita and I have reported, is pretty much what Paul Sincock shared at the front end of this meeting back in mid-January, but there are 3 or 4 other pages of particular questions. So I think rather than go into all of that tonight, I think if we can circulate that to the entire council, that would be a good way to keep this in front of us. And so we're looking forward to engaging other communities. I just saw something come over my electronic airwaves about a Commons of Park in Royal Oak, Michigan, I believe, which looked very interesting, and is just being dedicated now by around their centennial. They're only 100 years old. We've got them beat by 98 years, I guess. But anyhow, so that's all I would like to add to that.
Thanks, Frank. I would just like to add one other point too, that having gone to the Plymouth for dinner several times and driven through a number of times as well, the space is not very large. But one of the things that strikes me that's very unique about it too is just the proximity to the downtown restaurant scene and the establishment. They really have surrounded the town square. We asked Mr. Sincock about the impact of events, especially events that had food and that sort of thing, and how they engaged with the community. And he reported it was actually very positive, that the engagement between the private business establishment surrounded the square in particular, and any of the activities, even the ones that had effectively similar services, were had a really positive engagement. They were working things through, and so I think we heard that same response from gentlemen from the Downtown Detroit Partnership,
right?
And so I think there's not enough totally to draw a direct correlation, but there's a way to make these things work. Is I think what we're hearing, and as long as we're doing it intentionally, then it does. So that's the only other point I'd like to add.
Thanks for adding that, Adam. That it's true, very much the case both in Detroit and Plymouth. And I'm sure that they had to work through issues over time, but it's been done in a spirit of cooperation and listening to points of view and so on. And it seems to turn out to be a very positive feature of both these downtown areas.
Any other points in the comparable communities? All right. Are there other?
Is there an intent to look at other communities?
There is. Yes, we're slowly making our way through a number of other ones. We've had discussion around looking at Cincinnati as a future one, and we're looking elsewhere as well. I know you have sent a number of ideas as well, Alan. I don't think anything's crossed off the list yet.
It's good to look at Cincinnati because that's where Milton Mahoney has done work. So
we did note that, in fact.
Take note of that fact. You'll get a good docent for the tour.
Are there other updates at all? These are standing items on the agenda. So if there are none, that is fine as well. But if there are other updates from the block part, yeah, Frank, please.
Are any of the standing reports? I had just a comment on the fundraising front.
You can go ahead and make that comment. That's fine.
I don't know how widely it's known that the Library Green Conservancy has made a commitment of up to $20,000 to join with the city in providing funding for what will eventually become the RFP. And I think we also have a cooperative, clear understanding that we're going to work together to seek other sources of funding for the RFP and for other activities. The other area that Library Green is particularly interested in is the near-term activation. And I'm not in a position to announce at the moment, but we're close to having I think an important commitment from a community business in Ann Arbor that we'll be announcing in the near future. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Frank. Are there any other updates from either of the other two standing committees? You don't have to. Yeah, Sarah.
I don't have a real update, and I'm explaining why I don't have an update. And I'm also going to say publicly that I'm going to get the Block Partners group back together. I've had a very bad year. so far with COVID and then changing jobs. So I'll reach out to you guys to try to get something scheduled because I think we have a pretty decent survey to send out. I think it's just a matter of figuring out the process for that and then talking through next steps. So I will reconvene that working group this month.
And actually, in that vein too, I'll give a little bit of an update as well. We've had several conversations, with externally to this, and in fact, there's a working group that is more focused on Liberty Plaza, but being that Liberty Plaza is part of the space in question that we're charged with. There's a working group that has been formed. I just got a confirmation on the first meeting that is coming up here in a few weeks. And I've been invited to join that meeting, courtesy of Erica's advocacy. And so I'm going to participate in that. I'll report back afterwards. And additionally to that, we had a discussion with some of the staff from the Parks Department around that we coordinated. Heather set up, and I think it was a very productive discussion. It was around the idea of how the pros plan public review process of the pros plan that would impact Liberty Plaza, how that would fit into place with the work that we were doing. I think there was a strong acknowledgement. In fact, there was a plan or a recommendation from the Parks Advisory Committee that is a few years old now that talks about the coordinated activation. And we can share that around. It is a public document already. But the bottom line is I think that there was a strong interest in having a cooperative focus, working together and looking for a solution that took into account both spaces and that would be done together, not in isolation. And I feel like that's very much in the spirit of the work that's been done here and has been talked about. And so, I think that was a real positive discussion as well. There's a request that we come before the Parks Advisory Committee at some point in the relatively near future to make a presentation about where we are at and where we're thinking we're heading. And I think that would be a very good idea. And I stated that to the park staff that we'd probably be interested in doing that. And so those are just a couple of additional updates in that block partner space. Sarah, I haven't even had a chance to talk to you about them, so I apologize. But a couple of additional things.
That's wonderful news, Adam. Thank you for doing that. Engaging.
It's may I?
Please. Yeah.
It is wonderful news, and I just would like to have a little bit more of it. When you said you and Erica were part of some meeting, I didn't know what it was a meeting of, except that you said it was about Liberty Plaza. Are these council members? Are these Parks Advisory members? Or who is this?
Yeah, so it hasn't occurred yet. Actually, it was there was a discussion that I believe Mr. Mahoney coordinated in response to some of the issues that arose at Liberty Plaza, and there was an agreement in that discussion. I was not part of this, but it was an agreement to set up a working group around this. And Eric informed me of the working group, and I requested to be part of it. And it hasn't met yet.
So it's a working group of what body?
I believe it's city staff. I'll take a look. To be honest with you, I just got the confirmation on the email today.
Okay, I think I was looking forward to Mr. Mahoney sort of making this happen because he seemed enthusiastic about dealing with the Liberty Plaza opportunity and to make things better, to realize the advantages of it rather than have to constantly suffer the slings and arrows. But I hope you'll keep us updated as to how from what direction this is coming, whether it's multi-organizational like City Council, PAC, and several others, or like we are, or whether it's just some movers and shakers that are getting together and they will report to somebody. Don't know who.
Yeah, Erica, you went off mute there. Do you want to?
Yeah, I thought maybe I could just provide a little more context. So the the working group is kind of a continuation of a discussion. So initially there was Mr. Dehoney had pulled together sort of immediate stakeholders, Spark and everybody who's in the building, next to Liberty Plaza, essentially, who had raised some concerns about increased lack of safety in the area, and brought together as well into that group all of the service providers that are already operating out of that space, from Ann Arbor Police Department to PATH to Parks to a lot of the, I'm sure I'm missing some group, and then also Councilmember Romlawi and I were there, and I'm sure that there were a number of other staff members kind of internally in the city that were there. And so there was kind of a series of 3 meetings, one to kind of establish what the issues were, 2 to start kind of providing some feedback and making some kind of initial kind of recommendations about what might be some immediate steps that we could take, and then a final conversation to report back a little bit to that group. But following that meeting, there was vision to kind of shift how this work group would kind of operate moving forward. And so it won't be a group that, for example, Councilmember Romlawi and I would continue to go to. It's more of an internal stakeholder group that would be participating and monitoring and making sure that we're moving forward to address sort of the ongoing issues in that space. So that's sort of the context for that working group and stakeholder group. And it makes a lot of sense, though, to have Adam there and having some continuity in terms of how we're thinking about this space comprehensively as well.
Thank you, Erica. I still not quite clear. I see a lot of information going into a group of people, but I don't know how it will be offered to others. And that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah.
In other words, who we have to report to City Council, but who does this group report to?
It's really about, I think, making operations work better right now internally. So there's, this is a city park, and there are some things that are not working in that space right now in terms of issues of safety, but also making sure that the people who are using that space are actually getting the services that they need, and just trying to make sure that operations are improving in that space.
And so this could be also part of police reform, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely.
And I just looked, and Alice, I do have the first meeting is the 8th of this month, so it's coming up next week. I'll be happy to send an email out to folks here, following up after that meeting to give an update, and we can put that into the record, and
good.
Folks know what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Unless there are any other items. Oh, Rita, go ahead. Sorry, I can't see anybody's hands raised. You're muted, Rita.
Of the people meeting, is there anyone representing the people who are using the space about whom there's concern?
There's not direct users, sort of. Certainly folks like PATH that are there working with users on a regular basis in terms of the kind of the most vulnerable population. Certainly they are there and talking about kind of how they're interacting with folks, but it's not intended to necessarily be a community stakeholder meeting. That's not really the design,
Right. Could you explain PATH? I don't know the group.
Sure. So it's it used to be called PORT. It's PATH. It's basically a street outreach team that works to connect community members with resources that they might need. And there was kind of an assessment of they work all across the community, all across the county, actually. So there's a discussion of kind of when they're in the space, and might it be helpful if they were in the space at different times of the day to be interacting with people who are using the space at different times. So that was kind of it's funded through the county.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alan, yes.
Yes, well, sort of on the similar question of the critical stakeholders in that place are the actual users. And the long conversation has been there has to be a way to give recognition to the people who are using it as part of the governance and maintenance of the space as creative participants rather than as problems. And that's the view of people there with whom I have spoken, and with the people from the shelter who have a relation with a lot of the people who, hang out there. And I just am eager that that point of view and representation and those who are trying to program in the space are part of this conversation that is going on. And it seems like, in terms of dealing with the immediate violence issue that came up a month ago or so, that is a particular question. In terms of getting an ongoing discussion as to how this place develops, it seems to me that it needs to be broader. It should be including those who are programming there, the initiating committee, and those who are using it, including representation of the folks that are actually, playing chess and so on. So I feel a little bit that this is creating a separate structure to have some purpose, but not really integrating its discussion with the discussion of how, as a whole, the Liberty Plaza gets to be improved, because that is what our agenda is at all. So I hope that there is expansion of that group, and also that there is a regular communication report of what the conversations are, because those conversations are not simply among the staff. It is how a planning for a public space, not a staff managed space, is really to be carried out. So I just want to express that concern and hope that it is represented in the composition and in the process of this meeting.
Alan, I took some notes. I'll ask some of those questions at the meeting when we have it. Any additional questions at all? All right. If it's okay with folks, the next agenda item is actually a timeline for developing the recommendations report. But I almost feel like maybe we should talk about the RFIs first, and then we can talk about a timeline, even if we don't get to that point tonight. I do want to have us start to think through what our timing would look like, so we can march to a goal here and try and achieve that goal. But I think the RFIs are probably the first step in that process. Heather, would it be possible for you to share the RFIs and we can walk through them, given that you are more of the expert on this?
Sure, I can share the RFIs, and what would be helpful.
Could we have at least an outline of what the timeline is expected of when our annual report is due, advice is due to the city council? We got the note that we all expire in a year. So are we due with this report before the 31st of May, or in May, after our May meeting, after our April meeting? When is that? Without exactly what it is, I think that advice to the city council will probably include how we are responding to the response to the request for information. So I'm happy to concentrate on the request for information, but what really are just time-wise are timelines.
Yeah, and as I understand it, there's not a specific date that your report is due. I think the intention was that it would be, it would happen annually. I think that's the language in the resolution. So, but there wasn't a date that was set. So ideally, you'll put together a report annually to give recommendations to city council. Obviously, we're still kind of in a fledgling stage with all of this. Still trying to gather information to be able to write informed recommendations. So, really take the time that you need is my advice, so that you can put forward sound recommendations to City Council to consider. And there might be things that we can push forward a little bit earlier as things go on. For example, the RFI is one example, or doing an RFP is an example. Councilmember Briggs pushed that forward a little bit earlier, saying, okay, we need to get to thinking about how we're going to physically transform the space. So that's already in motion. And there might be other things that come up like that. But in the meantime, I do think it is worthwhile to take time to fully research before you put together a set of recommendations. Yeah, and as far as your appointments goes, it really played out in such an odd way. I don't know how common it is for everybody's term to end at the same date. So there was, behind the scenes, there was a lot of, oh wow, this is what's happening. Okay. Anyway, it should be all set now. All of you have your applications in, so you should be good going forward, I believe.
Excellent.
RFIs. Just a moment, I can pull those up. And what would be helpful to me is really just to get your thoughts on what you liked about each RFI. Ultimately, we do want to put out an RFP. So the goal of this exercise was really just to get a sense of what professionals might think, what they think would be a good process or might be a good process to do an engagement effort with citizens to figure out how these spaces would be physically transformed. So we do have 2 RFIs that provide some information, and I'd love your thoughts on what were the greatest hits from each of the RFIs in your mind. So bear with me as I pull that out. But in the meantime, please go ahead and share thoughts.
Adam, it looks like Erica has her hand up.
Yeah, Erica, please. I would say I am not a host tonight, so.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I want to interrupt. Heather, did you do you want me to chime in right now, or did you want to be sharing more? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, feel free.
Yeah, I thought it was, I'm really happy that we did the RFIs. I think it helps us understand better kind of these different approaches that we might be able to take, kind of what those anticipated costs might be in terms of associated with different processes. I think we saw a couple of different kind of proposals presented to us. One
recording in progress.
One that was, focused in on sort of a community design process and how that might play out. And then another process of kind of looking at a more traditional planning process that we've kind of seen play out in different ways across the city. I personally, while I appreciated the sort of the community design, kind of being able to think through that, I think there's a lot of merit to moving forward with a more of a traditional planning process on this, and making sure that we kind of move it through a timely process and get through that engagement, conceptual design, and kind of get to that final design piece, which is, or actually have some cost estimates. I thought it was, so I don't know if you wanted to talk, Heather, at all about any internal conversations that you might have had with city staff around how community design process might be considered from a kind of a, if that's played out in the city before in terms of our planning efforts, or any thoughts you might have on that.
Sure. So the sentiment among city staff is that it needs to have a lot of community engagement. This is a really important project for the city, so it has to have an intense and iterative engagement process. So going out to the public, getting input, coming back, working on design, going back out to the public, checking in, coming back, doing some more design. So building it with the community as we go along. So that at minimum, we know. And that brings up the question about doing a design contest. I think it's unlikely that the city would want to do a design contest because it doesn't lend itself necessarily to an iterative process with the community. So we would probably not go forward with something like that. We would want more of an engagement process. We also feel very strongly that we want some technical professionals on this. We want a design at the end of the day that we can technically implement. There's still going to be a lot of questions about the funding, how much this is going to cost and maintain. But, because this is on top of a parking structure versus just a green space, there are a lot of things that we need to consider. In addition to Liberty Plaza being already designed, it has, again, it's not just a flat surface. There's a lot of design that's already happened there. And if that's going to be reconfigured, we do need some real technical expertise on how we would do that. So that would be our preference going forward. And I do have both documents pulled up on my computer. My feeling is that I'll just leave it off screen for the moment, but if you want to refer to anything, then I can pull it up. But I think it's easier to talk to each other when we can see each other.
Yeah, Alex and then Frank.
When Erica, when you mentioned a more traditional planning process, I have no idea what that means. And I'm an urban design graduate. I don't know what a more traditional planning process is, unless it's something like Heather compared the contest versus the series of engagements with the community members. And in that regard, too, I'll have to say I carry some baggage from the days when we were doing many community meetings and workshops and everything. There were two things. One was, how to get 10,000 more residents downtown, and the other was the Greenway, when we were trying to figure out how that path would be created and of what elements. So, and those, I would say that all of those many hours of professionals and community members, the Greenway was not very satisfying to those who were looking for that Greenway to happen. It finally changed into a totally different animal, which I hope continues to produce good results. But I don't think that would work for this one site. At least not that. We want to be balanced in how we approach this. I think the inclusion of technical experts is essential because we have a built space already, and we need to know what is alterable and what is not, or what the results are, or what the costs are, to choosing one direction or not. They're just some thoughts that were sparked by what Erica and Heather have just said. I don't know whether it's a cautionary tale to look at those two examples, but I think there are good things that happened and things that just didn't happen. So I think we'll need some guidance in creating whatever it is that we decide to use. And I have to admit, you already know, I have not had a chance to look at the RFIs at all in detail. I did see that we got two, and I saw that there was one from Robert Black and one from a group that I don't know. They may have come from here. I don't know. But
yeah, and if there's,
it looked pretty much like the standard RFI. That's why I don't have much to say about it.
yeah, and keep in mind that they are RFIs. We didn't really ask to go into a full detailed process what they were proposed. So, it is limited in that way. But Alice, and anybody else, if you've had experience with the city or other cities anywhere else, with an engagement process, a design process, a planning process, I'd like to take what's called the appreciative inquiry approach to this, and pull out the things that you really liked out of those processes. So not even necessarily from the RFIs, but if there's things that you've experienced that you really appreciated, we can talk about those. And then, of course, if there are items in the RFI that really stood out, and either of them that really stood out to you that you really like and, caught your attention and want us to think about, then please bring those forward. And Rita, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I do want to say that I also participated in the Greenway process, and it came out not in a way that I expected either, and I attended a lot of meetings. So I hope that when we talk about an iterative process, it becomes one that whichever group we may go with, or process we may go with, that it does have a seriously confirming component to it, that those who participate and the community have a chance to really weigh in significantly on it. And so it doesn't become a surprise or something that we really don't want at the end, because we want what we're going for. So with that in mind, though, I would say that I found some of the examples. I mean, it's really nice to see physical examples or photos of examples of what could be. And it does make me feel excited to see some of them. Some of the different art in particular was inspiring to me, the interactive kinds of things. I liked that. It also stood out to me that a lot of people like water. And so having a fountain of some sort with a playful aspect, I think is really good. And there was a lot of examples of performance space, I would say, that I liked as well. So without going into real specifics on them, those are just like the basics. And again, it's just, back to let's make sure that engagement is true engagement that reflects what participants have expressed. Thanks.
Got it. Okay. So far, I have inclusion of technical experts as essential. The community has to have a meaningful say. We don't want any surprises at the end. And you're liking the examples of what could be. So that visioning, what could be there, art, water, performance space. Frank.
Yeah. I want to start out by saying I'm obviously not an expert on these processes, but I do have a strong feeling that two feelings. One is we have one chance to sort of get this right. And the second observation is, and every project has its unique features, but this has its history and the complexity of the site, et cetera. I'm feeling a strong need for this process to really understand the data we have, what was generated by the task force, to really, I know there's hundreds, if not thousands of pages of material. And not that one would do this and the other wouldn't, but it just felt it was strongly articulated in the Robert Black group that we really need to engage with the DDA, understand that structural do's and don'ts of that site. We also have to really engage with the DDA to understand what they see as their role in this. It hasn't come to fore in our first year of deliberations where the DDA is going to come out. Are they going to be a strong advocate? Are they going to sit on the sidelines, et cetera? It just seems that we need to do really good work at the front end so that we understand what we're dealing with structurally, et cetera, but also some of the political issues around this. And it just seems that the more emphasis we can put at the sort of the front end stages of good research and good understanding, and I think it doesn't bother me that one approach might take longer than the other. I think we need a lot of coalition building, a lot of recognition of what this can be from the block partners and the surrounding businesses. So I'm not particularly troubled by taking a little bit longer timeline. I think that the longest timeline does bring us up to some important milestones occurring by mid 2024, which is the bicentennial. And again, I think an emphasis on the bicentennial and that this project be viewed as an important gift to ourselves for our third century, and to tie it into the bicentennial, I think is important. I think that we have the resources in place right now to do many of the things that are outlined by the Robert Black group. Again, I don't know what is the perfect cadence and milestones of this, but instinctively, I'm feeling that the more we do at the front end of this project to understand, what the community wants, and I think a lot of that has already been documented in the task force, et cetera. And I'm intrigued by the contest idea, the competition. I think that was brought forward because many great parks in the country, and I think the one that was cited was Central Park in New York, was the inspiration for that design came from a competition. And I think that builds community interest. If we have that kind of activity, both among the school children, but also, more mature, capable entities that might present design solutions. It doesn't commit us to anything, but it certainly will get us further along the imagination, imagining this. And I think there would be clear material and guidelines for that competition. It's just not, here's a clean sheet of paper, give us what you think. I think that we'd have to provide some real guidance in terms of the elements we want reflected in a design and et cetera, and getting a clear understanding of the structural limitations and possibilities of especially the surface of the parking area. Maybe those need to be articulated in the design description that would go out. And I always have a fundraising cap on. I just think that doing a really good job at the front end, which includes obviously engaging the various constituencies, will build stronger buy-in as this process goes along. And we're already seeing this in the near-term activation, where we're talking to community groups and they're saying, oh, hey, maybe we can have yoga classes on the surface of the parking area and other kinds of activities. So we're seeing groups in the community beginning to say, oh, thanks for bringing that to our attention. I think we see some possibilities here. There's a lot more discussion to go on and et cetera in terms of actually scheduling events and activities, but we're beginning to see this process of engagement and building of excitement around the possibilities of this site. So I'll stop there, but those are kind of my initial thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. What I've written down is making sure that we engage with the DDA to understand their structure and how they see their role. And also for this process to serve as a coalition building process, in addition to, generating ideas and a design at the end. Incorporate the bicentennial in some way, and then clarify, if we were to do some type of competition, clarify the limitations beforehand. But most importantly, what you really emphasized is that we're not starting from scratch. And I completely agree with you. There's just been so much thought and work that has gone into really for decades. And then with the task force, of course, did a lot of work and actually did reach out to the community quite a bit. But to have all of that information gathered and acknowledged and read through and used as part of this process.
Thank you, Heather.
Mm-hmm. Alice, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce what a couple of others have said about community engagement. I think there is a real danger in repeating one mistake, and that is not when people are asked to fill out surveys, when people are asked to put sticky notes on big pieces of paper, when they're asked to rate or out of these 5 options, what do you like best, that kind of thing. And then they see no correlation in the end result. It feels like it's all fake. And so when we say we're going to do that, we really do need to have, maybe let go of the, what do you call it, the aggregate ego and say, oh, well, yeah, I had an idea, but nobody else liked it. So we have to go with the flow. It's something that can build on the success of those who have an investment that in that they see that their contribution is revealed in the end result. And that's pretty abstract and pretty hard to do. But I think when you have the right kind of engagement, you end up with a pretty clear thing. And I think the task force hit a lot of things right on the nose, and we really do not want to put that in the archive. We should have that closer to the front of what we're doing. But a lot of this has already been done and quite reasonably well, and by a group of people who really worked hard on it. So I don't want that to be a wasted resource at all. I think we can elaborate on it, highlight some things rather than other things, but we really don't want to lose sight of what's already been done.
Just a quick comment in follow up to Alice. I think bringing that task force information into the current discussion and engagement with block partners, the wider business community groups in general, to bring that forward in a way that can share with the community again what has been already developed. I think there'd be a real value in that, not necessarily creating new information, but that may trigger some new ideas and coalescing around some of what's already been developed by the task force.
Mm-hmm. So maybe starting from a reorientation, a place of review, going over what's been done with the community, all of us kind of sharing in that.
I don't want to be too repetitive, because haven't we done this before kind of thing? Maybe we can just pick some things and move forward with them.
Right, and that is the intention, to pick up where we left off, basically from the task force, because we didn't get as far as actually getting to the detail of specifically how are we going to physically alter the space. We have a lot of ideas about it, but to really put the pen on paper of this is what's going to happen, put some cost estimates to it, so it can get that much closer to realization.
Yeah, I would just add, I agree with many of the things that have been said here. I do think that whatever the process is, that the end products are a reflection of the community engagement is going to be really important. I also do feel probably most strongly about the fact that we have a really robust creative visioning process. I respect and agree with the fact that the task force visioning serve as a catalyst. But I also want to be conscious of the fact that because of the politics around this space, we really have got to inspire the community, I think. And I think you do that through a really robust visioning process with a lot of ideas to show them what could become, rather than what has been discussed necessarily, or at least discussed in a lot of context. So I think that's going to be really important as well. And I too believe that we need a very professional driven process. I don't think, respectfully to everyone here, we are professionally equipped to do that. I think we will have a role, and it'll be an important guiding role, but we need to hire people who are well equipped to handle the technical aspects and also the creative aspects. And I think the other thing that we want to be conscious of too is, one of the things that we have seen in these comparable communities are governance models going forward and sustainable revenue streams going forward, and what's necessary. And I think we need to be thinking about that as part of this process. Not only construction costs, those are important, but what are we going to do going forward, and what are we going to recommend, and where do those resources come from? And so I know that's been on my mind a lot, and I think that's going to be an important part of the planning process for this. So
yes, you're right, Adam. I have noticed that in our comparable communities explorations, we have seen a lot of cooperation in other places that we are not seeing at this point here. And it's going to be important to build or rebuild the kinds of relationships that will enable us to have an imaginative, very reflective result of our community. And I appreciate your bringing that to the front of our conversation.
Thank you, Adam. That these are maybe elements that need to come forward. We're talking about design and development, the physical development, but there's this home management piece. And maybe we need to call that out in an RFP. I don't know. Is it proper for an RFP to deal with, contentious issues and how to bring people, conflicting people, groups with conflicting feelings about this, how to bring that piece together? Because all these elements need to move from where they are now to a much better place. I had obviously thought about the management piece because we've talked about it, but just the politics of this and how do we sort of move this forward? I don't know if that is even appropriately part of an RFP, but it's something that needs to be addressed as we move along here.
Yeah, I'll just offer one thought to that, Frank, and I know Sarah's got her hand up here too. It's really the job of this group to try and look out for the aspects of the overall direction and ensure that the process is what we want it to be, and that it sufficiently checks all of the boxes we feel is important. I too am not familiar with what would go into an RFP on this, but in terms of the long-term financing and other items, I would lean on Heather's expertise to help comment on that. But I think that the more options that we have put on the table, reality is that even though different financing schemes are going to have different political angles to them, the document itself, or a response to that, a presentation of all those options, is politically ambivalent. And that's what we need to rely on those professionals to be able to tell us what all of the options are, so that we can look at them and put them on the table and discuss what the politics are. And I feel like that's actually part of our role here too, and to help bring community along. And so I would look at the professionals to lay out those things for us, what the options are, and we can certainly offer suggestions and be creative, but I'd much rather have a pretty good idea of the landscape, and then we can help make the recommendation ultimately to City Council in concert with the design recommendations. So that's my thing.
Thanks.
Yeah, Sarah, you have your hand up.
You kind of forget what I was going to say, but that's okay. I think it's a very good point to keep in mind that we don't really have like a long-term plan for this. I guess things are just popping into my head that are making me take pause. So maybe I'll just say those things. You know, I would hate to sort of have this really robust community engagement process that I also agree is more or less needed, but then we put, you know, you put people through all of this and then we end up with nothing in the end. So I think there just really needs to be that balance of like, how do we want to design this process in a realistic way to, you know, I think it's important that the RFP or the proposals come back to us with sort of like just kind of like a timeline. Like, what are some of these like low hanging fruit type of things that could go into this? Like, if we really don't have very much money, like what are the sort of things that we could do? Another thing that keeps popping into my head, and I should have a better answer for this, but I don't, and I don't think there is an answer, as we're talking about robust community engagement, is that we are going to be doing, I'm pretty sure, restarting the comprehensive planning process soon, which is also going to require robust community engagement. And people get engagement fatigue. And so I don't know about the timing of this versus the timing of that. I just think it's something that we should keep in mind as we're sort of like progressing forward with this. Erica, you might remember better than me. Maybe it's next year. But you know, we want to make sure that there's good engagement. We just, I think, have to be really careful about how we do it, especially keeping in mind what others just already mentioned, that we have a good basis to start with. We're not really starting from nothing. We have the task force, right? The task force's recommendations as a starting point.
I think Alan and then Erica.
Yeah, the last comment that you made, Sarah, on the planning. You're from the Planning Commission, is that right? You got it on your mind. Well, part of this endeavor is to integrate with the master plan. So in some way, our community engagement and planning should be interdigitating with the master planning process as to how the center of the city actually, you know, becomes the center of the city. And so that's something definitely to keep in our mind. What I most want to say is that there are elements of this problems that are that are beyond our control and that we have not sufficiently explored. That what happens with the Martin Company is critical as to how we basically have a commons that is a sort of a barbell. We've got Liberty Plaza on the northeast, and we got the library surface lot on the southwest. And how do we make that connection between them? And that is really dependent on what kind of relation we develop with the Martin Company as to whether we bridge them, go through them, or walk around them. And until that somehow has a conversation going on, we're a little bit stuck. And similarly, we have an indeterminate relationship with the library, and much of the sense of indoor four-season gallery and such like activities, gathering place and such, is seen as possibly in the library, when the library put forth their bond issue in 2013 or whatever it was. They had that view of themselves. We need in this some sense of cafe, various functions, and how we relate to the library in sharing those functions or in having them independent of the library in a separate building really requires a discussion that hasn't even opened the door. And it seems, and similarly, how we bridge over and whether we consider bridging over the space between over the parking ramps, or whether we abandon the parking ramps to cars rather than reclaiming that elevated area for people, is a question that a design group can certainly address, but we're not giving any direction in that way. I certainly, as you all know, have my view on that, that we should subordinate the automobile and maximize people's space by bridging over Library Lane to some significant part to connect up with the library. But those basic questions that we want a design group to consider, yet we have not specified and as on the docket. We just put out very general questions, and I think we need to be somewhat more specific as to the questions that deal with this alternative or that alternative, or how do you see it? The main thing I want to emphasize is that if this is the center of our city, everyone in Ann Arbor has to see it as the center of their city. That the communities have to see themselves reflected somehow in the aesthetics, in elements that they can see is part of who we are, whether we are part of the old Germans or whether we are part of the Black community, or whether we are part of the Arab community or part of whatever. That is not a mishmash of a unity with no character. It has to be a very multiplicitous character. And so I think that we need a kind of community engagement that really goes to all the communities and draws out from them in multiple ways how they see themselves best reflected, that they would feel when they come to the center of the city, aha, this looks like me and like my home. I'm at home here in the center of the city. Not something that a group, however professional, provides as a service to being a neutral public space that anybody can do anything in. That is not my view of what is the Commons. The Commons is a place that everyone shapes together in some way, and is not a blank slate. There's a slate that is very rich in the contributions of all the communities of Ann Arbor. That's why I particularly feel that what Robert and his associates, all of whom are very familiar with Ann Arbor, who've worked in Ann Arbor, who know this town, have a great advantage in designing a kind of community engagement that can draw out from our community, not filling out a survey. And I was not very pleased in a sense with the data that we got in the task force, and it did not go deep. But we need something, people who are there who really have a sense of Ann Arbor and want to see how to draw that out. So that is a criterion I look for in what we are putting out in the request for proposals, how you really help us see the voice of all the communities of Ann Arbor, how a collective aesthetic could somehow be represented in the center of the city, as well as dealing with these difficult questions of how we bridge and interact with the Martin Company, and how we interact and connect with the library, and how the indoor functions of a civic center are met and where. And I think another aspect of this is how we see the expansion of the commons beyond what is initially given, particularly the opportunity to include the Noble House, which would provide a service center place beneficial to the Liberty Plaza community, if I may say so. And so part of, and how we see the opportunities of the credit union to redesign or infill in their space. So we have partners that are not just static, but all of whom are in motion. And the element that we want to bring forward has to sort of interconnect with that, with those motions. And we may find, so that is part of the request for proposals or the next step, if it is request for proposals is the next step. The next step seems to me, in a way, getting a clearer sense of how the library sees its next phase, how the Martin Company sees its next phase, how the credit union sees its next phase. And as we, in the community block outreach that we're sort of touching on in this survey, what new information we are getting as to how our neighbors are agitating themselves toward the future. So I just dropped those pebbles in the pond, however you wrote those down, Heather. But I think there's a lot of problems that we know of that we have to identify more directly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just reflect those back to you real quickly. One of the things that you said loud and clear was we need a space that provides a sense of belonging to everybody.
Yes.
That everybody is welcome there. And that we need to think about the potential expansion of the center of the city as land use changes around the existing public spaces. So just kind of do some future imagining with this process. Make sure that there's connection with adjacent uses and activities. So what's happening at the library will impact these spaces, for example, as well as First Martin. And to make sure that there is connection between Liberty Plaza and the library service lot, and how we might address that. And then going back to what Sarah said earlier, making sure that we get a timeline with phases. What are the low-hanging fruit, for example? What are the things that we can start initiating right away? So it feels like there's constant momentum with this, rather than now we have a design and then we sit on it for 10 years until we can gather the funds to make it happen. All right, so going on to Briggs.
Thanks. Heather, by the way, your ability to summarize is incredible. A few pieces. I think one piece that is going to be important for us in terms of the RFP that sort of was articulated in the MKSK proposal was sort of this element of they have it as in their final plan, the plan would include a plan of action, funding opportunities, project phasing, implementation matrix, opinion of cost, and a maintenance plan, roles and responsibility, which I think are really key things that I've heard articulated. But to kind of points that both Adam and Sarah brought up, we've done a fair amount because of the research that this group has done. There's been a fair amount of focus on, that the importance of that governance model, and I do think that we might be able to use a little bit of that to help. We might want to contemplate whether or not we want to have that inform the design process up front. And by that, I mean, we could go into this process. Of course, any planning firm wants to be visionary and inspirational, and that's good. If you want to get that, you want to get people excited about something, but we also, I've also heard folks talking about wanting to be pragmatic and have this implementable, and that the reality is part of the reason this was politically charged was this concept around funding, and acknowledging our funding shortfalls up front might help us get to a more a plan that we can better implement down the road. I think that one of the concerns that we've heard from park staff is wanting to be careful about going out to the community and doing a robust community engagement plan, especially around Liberty Plaza, and then not being able to implement that plan. And so, park staff has shared that in this engagement process, we need to be very clear with the community up front around the fact that there isn't funding for this. And so, and helping that help inform the planning process up front might be helpful. I think it's a little difficult. I don't know how we go about, or if that's advisable to, help that inform how we write an RFP. But I think it is particularly important in terms of thinking about it as a phased project, that we might be thinking about this also, that we want designs that can stand alone and can be broken apart, so that we obviously want it to be connected, but we also want Liberty Plaza, for example, to be, if First Martin is redeveloping and really wants to help invest in that space, that might be something that, for example, could be help really inform that planning process, for example, or the redevelopment of, around the block, as others have spoken to, might help to inform these different phases. So I guess I would advocate for a pragmatic, more phased approach to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, I do want to reemphasize that. That is something that we heard from park staff, and I completely agree with that. We need to be really sincere and honest with the public that there is no funding in hand right now to implement anything that might come out of this. We are trying to figure this out as a community, what the transformation of the space would be to make it a public space. But the funding piece is yet to come. That's something that we still need to work on. So Rita, Frank, and then Alan.
Well, I thought that we were going to talk about how to work together with the funding process. So I hope that that's part of what we're going to be discussing coming up. So to just say there's no funding, that's not exactly correct. There is some funding, at least for this start point. And we do have to figure it out for the future, of course, and the sustainable parts of it for the future. But I feel pretty depressed when I hear it's just like no funding. Sounds like closed the door. So I hope that we can, if we're going to say no funding, that we're going to find a way to open the door to the community to contribute, and in various ways, not just individuals, but organizations and businesses and the DDA. So I hope that that's part of where we're going. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. There is no identified source of funding for capital improvements and ongoing costs at this point. So that is something that we just need to, as it comes along, as we figure it out, we need to communicate that with the public. But the starting point right now is that hasn't been identified.
I don't even know what we're trying to identify for. This is
right.
I'm right with Rita. We don't want to make blanket statements that actually imply that what are we sitting here for? If we can't do it, we can't do it. But we can do it. And so, I think that was a pretty big trigger for me as well to hear. There's no funding. There's no identified funding. There's no, no, and no. We're here to figure out the yeses.
Yeah, I would just emphasize that I think that the reality is that there is we're not doing anything unless we can find a way to fund this. There is no construction costs funding pool yet. We're going to have there are a lot of things that we're going to have to identify, and I will emphasize that I agree with Rita's attitude. You can what's the old saying that if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right. And so I am going to try and approach this very much the former, because I do think that we can, and I think that the examples from other communities emphasize that. So I certainly always want to emphasize realism and honesty and transparency matter, but I do think it's going to be very important that we look for an opportunistic eye to this.
Right, and it's not just a matter of going out and asking for money. It's a matter of leveraging what we do have, so that it becomes integrated with the future of our city. So like looking at the Greenbelt ordinance and seeing if there's a way to shift the application of those funds. Looking at the sustainability program to see if there's a way that this can really advance the A20 program or whatever part is related to that. This is where we have to open those doors. We have to make those connections so that we can go through those doors. And that means our city will go through those doors that open it to, you know, a less anxious period of time. We are, I don't know about anybody else, but there's a lot of anxiety out here, especially from the last 2 years and what came before that and what's coming up right now. We need something to give our feet solid ground to go forward on. And I think that overall, when I think of a place that all of us are trying to articulate, that's actually the solid ground. It's not this one place, but it's what it means to the city to have this place. So that's my little philosophical rant.
I think that's a great statement, Alice. I know we got a couple hands up, and I want to emphasize that we are 8:52, and so if we can just make sure everybody gets to say what they want to say, and then transition to going forward. I think this was a good exercise to talk through tonight, given that we've got a response. So Alan, and then Frank, and then let's see if there's any other points, and we'll try and wrap up.
Well, I think Frank had his hand up first, but you called on me. So I just want to say that I think that the point that David Olson raised is absolutely relevant. There's a bond issue that provides funds for acquisition and management of parkland in the city and out of the city. The only reason that is not being operated is because the city council long ago said in the city only for acquisition. And there's a city council election. There are 2 people on this body that should be putting forth the resolution to withdraw that old resolution and allow the park greenbelt funds for use in the city to be used that would be appropriate for this project. That's one. There is money right there, and the only thing that is preventing it is a old city council resolution that could easily, with 6 votes, be disappeared. And I hope those votes would be there, and they should be an issue in the next election. And that should be part of our recommendation. Our advice to the city council is they should just do it. And also, if we create something out of a process that does indeed engage people, from the little people up to the big and old people, and that would turn out something beautiful. Ann Arbor is just about the richest town around. There's a lot of money in this town. If we can do something beautiful, private financing for $100 million is no big deal, because there is that kind of money if it is beautiful. I know Frank has, he and his buddies have raised it over at the university too. So without putting any number on it, I don't think that the absence of money is the problem. The absence of a beautiful, vision that is drawn out and filled like the possession of people in the city, that can be funded. But actually, there is money that has been voted for by the people for exactly this purpose, and it should be freed for use. And that is a question that is up to the people on this council and people on the city council to address. And I'm glad that David Olson brought it up. He brought it up during the library Green Conservancy meeting. He brought it up during the task force meeting. We should listen to it. It is a true fact. There is money just sitting there, except for an old restriction by the city council that is not binding on the future.
Alan, Frank?
Okay, I'll try. I'm looking at the clock. I think we do need an overall vision to point towards, but it may have been Eric or maybe Alice or both. Maybe this process does need some intermediate steps that can be defined and achieved as we move towards the bigger, longer term vision, and that includes, defining what those steps are and building support for that. If there's financial components to that, I just think this process needs real engagement with selected block partners, the broader business community, the philanthropic community, to bring key components of those audiences along as this process develops. And maybe, you know, I don't want to break out one piece to the detriment of the larger picture, but perhaps Liberty Plaza is that piece, because the interest is been regenerated by this task force and unfortunately by events. Maybe that can be a piece that we can develop some intermediate steps and build block partner and broader community support if there's some financial components to that. And I think we need a snowball, and it's, you know, all snowballs start small, but they can get very big. And, you know, maybe there's some discrete things related to the surface area. You know, I've had talk with donors about perhaps building a fund cooperatively between the park and commons and the library, programmatic funding that somehow links the library and their commoning mission with what is happening outside physically on the surface area. So maybe there could be discrete pieces that will help us build momentum as this process unfolds. So,
thank you, Frank. So I think I'm going to make a suggestion here. Heather did a very nice job summarizing folks' thoughts. Why don't we take that offline a little bit and see if we can translate that into some actionable next steps and get that back to folks here for consideration, you know, in between this meeting and the next. And I think also, you know, Sarah will get us started on that block partner engagement. You know, clearly that is important to these next steps, and then, you know, we can bring that back. So I'm going to make that suggestion, and if folks, you know, want to be involved in that, you know, why don't you reach out to Heather, and we can get a little group of folks together if that's a desire. Feels like that's, you know, we need to build a little plan of action, and maybe these meetings are a good opportunity for reflection upon that plan, but we do the heavy lifting offline. That sound okay?
Well, Heather, those notes, can you circulate them to everyone?
Yep, I can do that.
I don't know what offline means.
It means not in the current situation.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but is that
meetings?
I think it means that we're not going to try and wordsmith something on Zoom.
There's nothing sinister in it.
Right, I've seen that happen before. Tough to do. So
let me know where the offline is.
We will. Definitely. All right. Any other points at all before we wrap up and you know, move into public comment?
Well, I want to say that I can appreciate giving an emphasis to Liberty Plaza, but the problem with activating the library lot is that the cars are still there. Get the cars off and the people will come. There'll be more programming. There'll be stuff going on there. It is very unfriendly to the whole process that the cars are still there after 39 meetings that the DDA has not yet put it on their agenda. That should be our number one recommendation to the city council. One more time, city council should say, get the cars off so that people can begin to have a program there without having to go through a special permit, and can be able to leave stuff there and actually begin to make it a people space. Taking the time, it's 9 o'clock.
Okay.
It's the truth.
Heather, do we have any members of the public who'd like to make a comment?
Yes, Robert Black.
Good evening again. It's fascinating to listen to you guys. I just applaud your courage to wade through this stuff. You know, these are not mutually competitive responses to the RFI. They are mutually inclusive ideas that overlap. And as Heather's first question is, what are your greatest hits from these things? Look at that carefully and see what's there. Both have strong, practical, structural people. One of them has a group that's right above Afternoon Delight that knows a whole lot about structures that's a stone's throw away, and they see that lot every day. And there are other land planners and professional architects on both sides who are extremely important to this process. The other part, though, is having strong professional facilitation to guide you through these next steps. And I'd encourage you to follow this process. Rita said, open the door, which means, we all carry mental models of our ideas of the past, and we don't necessarily want to shape the future from them, but we want to consider them, right? All about practicality, all about being grounded. There are outside shaping forces to this project. This is a teeny project compared to other big urban projects like Central Park or something. It's teeny. So the shaping forces here are small and definable. Your process to articulate those defined pieces is a no-brainer for a good facilitator. We're going to talk about funding now. We're going to talk about structures now. We're going to talk about water management. That kind of stuff is easy to handle if it's directed by somebody who knows how to direct it and not let it sidetrack so you end up with what Greenways was or something else. A good facilitator will get you through the process and get to goals, as I heard many times. Also, as Alice said, we don't know yet what we are trying to identify for. And then I also heard, if you think you can, if you think you can't, you're right. So let's think we can, right? That's a recommendation. And then Alice also said, give our feet solid ground to go forward on. This is extremely practical and foundational to this. So the inner shaping forces that drive this thing need to be defined more clearly, in my opinion. The task force needs to be sorted and prioritized and listed specifically. What do you want there? You don't want to pay money to a pie-in-the-sky design that's not grounded in reality of what do you really need to do here. And you have that information before you, you just haven't defined it yet. And as Frank said, you need an overall vision to point towards, clearly. But it has intermediate steps that shape that vision. And so part of this process, I think, that you're struggling with is to define these pieces. Take the work that Heather suggested and put these pieces together in an overlapping set of visions and then quantify those steps that you need. You will be surprised that as you move forward with this process, the help you need will show up, just like the funders. I've had many conversations with Frank and even other people in the Ann Arbor community about how funding will appear. The nonprofits I've worked with and others, miracles literally happen when you're clear about your future and what you need. So I think it's important that you need to assemble this criteria as a foundation to move forward. So you're doing great. It's just wonderful to stay open, sort this process, pick the best of everything together, and you've got some wonderful things to document and move forward toward an RFP. So kudos to your conversations tonight, and I really applaud you for staying with this thing. You're going to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
And then we have the person with the phone number ending in 326.
Hello, this is Jeff Crockett again. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Ken.
Okay, great. I just want to tell you that I am really pumped up about the garden this year. There's really a lot of exciting things going on, particularly with Rita's help. And we have already outreached to the DDA, by the way. We've talked to, my wife and I talked to Jeff Watson, and we briefed him on our plans. We're talking about expanding from 2 plots to 4 plots. We're talking about adding, with Rita's help, pollinator plants to attract monarch butterflies. And I want you to imagine for a minute, right now we're talking about expanding to 4. There are 14 plots around the around the center of the city parking lot. Now, just imagine if all those 14 plots had pollinators. Now imagine families walking in the middle of the summer and watching the butterflies and the bees. It becomes a destination. And guess what? There's no cost involved to the city. This is something you can do with no cost except for volunteers. And that is what tells us what the Commons is really all about. So when you talk about the activation of the Commons, consider what has already been done. Really important. The other thing, I want to invite you all to come to one of our meetings. We've been meeting on a bi-weekly basis, typically on Saturdays, by Zoom. And we started this in mid-January. If any of you want to come, contact Rita. She'll give you the Zoom link. We'd be happy to have you come. And I guarantee you're going to learn something. Joette Rioma, who is our consultant, is really into mulching, and in fact is embarked on a project to help people reduce the amount of compost they put in their bins, because this results in a cost to the city. So imagine if you can process this locally without putting in your compost bin. So we're learning how to do that. We're also involved in a seed exchange. So the seeds that came from the sunflowers and other plants last year, we have harvested and we have dried them. And we're going to put them into envelopes. And during Earth Day, we're going to hand them out so that we can spread these seeds and have other people sort of enjoy it. That's sort of the beauty of what we're doing with citizen engagement and getting other people involved. And then, of course, there are the pollinators. But the other thing I would encourage you to think about is that coming up for your annual report, you have a key opportunity here, and to remove the parking. This involves no cost. If any of you happen to be around in the parking lot, underneath the parking lot, it is by no means filled. So if you remove the street parking, there's going to be no hit to the DDA. There was some mention before about the DDA was going to lose parking, but there was no consideration to the fact that, hey, this is COVID, and there are a lot fewer people parking downtown during the day. So I would encourage you to get some data and find out of all the parking spots there are in the structure, how many are actually filled during the day. I would think you would find not that much, and you could easily accommodate removing the parking. So there's no cost, and there's a lot of space downstairs. So it wouldn't take much to create a storage facility close by in one of the parking spots that are no longer be used. In fact, I bet Alan would be happy to build the darn thing. But basically what you need is to create a facility to make it easy to store stuff. And the last thing I want to say, it wouldn't take much to provide seating. My guess is if you look around the parks, there are a lot of benches that are not being used, a lot of seats that are not being used. My guess, so move them, move them to the Commons to create some place for people to sit. It's going to cost little money, but it is an intermediate thing that you can do to activate the Commons. So I would encourage you long-term to think big, but short-term to think practical and getting the Commons going. Thank you very much.
All right, and we have the caller that's ending in 340. Should be able to talk.
Hi, greetings. My name is Luis Vasquez, resident of the First Ward, living at 909 Barton Drive in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I feel like I'm watching the movie Groundhog's Day, because every time I watch one of these meetings, the same issues keep on getting rehashed and discussed. And here we are nearly 4 years after Prop A was voted in by a bare majority. And, we still have not very much to show. I'm kind of getting upset, especially since with this notion that's being put forward about looting the Greenbelt millage money. That's not what I voted for the Greenbelt millage. I held a fundraiser at my house to get that passed. I really don't want to see that rated for this purpose. The pitiful amount of money that's been raised so far, it's a drop in the bucket. And now you guys have your hands out trying to ask the city taxpayers for money to fund this, which you really don't. I mean, so far you don't really have a vision. And here it is, 4 years later. Come on, guys. Give us a break. Get something done. It shouldn't have taken 4 years, nearly 4 years, to realize that Liberty Commons is the first thing that needs to be addressed on that whole block. And if you can't, do something about Liberty Plaza to improve it, what makes you think? What makes me think? What makes anybody in Ann Arbor think that millions of dollars should be put towards the library lot? I'm really incensed about this, and I'm frankly kind of tired of it. But thank you for your time and for listening to me and my concerns.
All right, and we have one more person on the line. The person whose phone number ends in 663.
Hello, my name is Abdul. I'm calling in because I want to point out that there's a great opportunity to activate the commons for the goals of the city. Thankfully, the parking garage is designed to be a substructure for a building. And if you don't know about high-rise construction, one of the most expensive parts of high-rise construction is the substructure because it costs a lot of money to dig. And you're always going to dig if you want to build anything. If you see right now on Southeast, they're building this new high-rise building, and they're spending 8 months digging to build the substructure. 8 months until they even start thinking about going vertical. And thankfully, this library parking garage is a wonderful substructure. Also, it's a really convenient spot to put something that can activate the space for people who walk past. I walk past there regularly. I'm going downtown, way to go grab my tea with my friends. I'm always walking back and forth there. It's a very big empty space in the middle of the city. It's kind of like a hole, you might say. A hole that I don't think will be filled by some dirt thrown on top of a parking garage. But yeah, so because of this substructure part, if you're building, say any kind of building, I want to say like 10 to 20% of construction costs are going to come from that building, and 15 to 20% of your construction cost, of your total cost to build anything, are going to be land acquisition costs. So saying like if you're saving about 35% of your total cost to build anything, that basically what that like you do is build affordable housing, build income restricted housing to help people to give a place for people who want to live in Ann Arbor, who can't afford to live here. We have a housing wait list that's 3,300 people long. So I suggest putting this back to the voters and doing what we're doing with all of our other parking lots in the city, trying to use them to get the city's goals done. Because this has been going on for 4 years, and I think that there's been like $20,000 raised, and that's not going to do anything. It's not even going to hire a consultant. I say, take us back to the drawing board. This is a great opportunity to put affordable housing. I'm almost confident you can build 100% affordable building. You can put a park on top of the building, on the side of the building, in the middle of the building. There's so many different options where you can put a park. But you're going to save so much money with this substructure that's already been placed in and zero land acquisition costs. And it's that by saving 35% of construction costs, you can offer 100% affordable units. I almost guarantee it. I haven't looked into the finances, like done all the calculations and whatnot, but I'm pretty sure that it can make sense and it can qualify for housing millage money. You could even try getting LIHTC money from the federal government. That would eliminate its eligibility for our money. But you can get low-income housing tax credit money. There are so many different ways that you can fund this project, and it would be a much greater activation of the space than throwing some dirt on top of a concrete slab. Thank you.
Any other members of the public, Heather?
Somebody with their hand up. I think they already went. I just want to double check. The person with the phone number 340, I think your hand was just continued to be up, but let me double check with you. Okay, that's it.
Okay. All right. Could we have a motion for adjournment then? All right. Motion and seconded. And looks like somebody else just raised their hand, Heather.
Person with the phone number 345.
Yeah, why don't we give them just one opportunity to adjourn?
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry. I tried to unmute myself earlier and I pressed 2 6s instead of 1, and so I had to do it again. My name is Kitty Khan, and I wasn't going to call in, but a few things that were said tonight got me a little agitated, and so I decided I would. First of all, Erica, try to be a little positive. Your comment about there was no funding, we might as well admit it, there's no funding. Tell people in the RFP there's no funding. No, that's not right. That's not right. And I really resent the fact that you said that. It's like you're trying to sabotage the effort. Please don't. And another thing is, that guy that just called saying we should put affordable housing on the lot, excuse me, the Y lot right across the street is going to have a ton of affordable housing. Those residents of those towers are going to love to have open space across the street because they don't have a yard. They're in these towers. So enough with the affordable housing argument. We need open space. If only the mayor and his majority would get behind this effort like Plymouth did, like other cities do, instead of trying to sabotage it. He's so mad that he couldn't sell this to his core spaces that it's sour grapes all over the way, all the time. And I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of reading on Nextdoor people saying, oh, this is going to fail. What have they done? Just like Lewis. He's one of them. There are so many naysayers, and I'm sick of it. If only people would join together, this can happen. And I still think it can happen, but I am so sick of the powers that be and the mayor supporters in this town trying to sabotage this effort. So I really give credit to the people who can remain positive in spite of the naysayers, and I believe this can happen. I really do. And it's hard when you have to push through a wall of people that want it to fail. And that's all. You can tell how angry I am. And I'm sorry, I can't be as positive and upbeat as so many are. But I know this can happen, and I know it will be wonderful. And I just wish our local government would get behind it. I really wish that could happen. And I agree with David Olson. Look into that green belt millage funding. The city has money that isn't being spent, that is supposed to be spent inside our city. There is money. there is money. If only our local government would get behind this project, it wouldn't be this hard. Okay, that's all. Good night. Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor, technically still. So if we could have an approval to adjourn, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks. Good night.
Too.